This video is dedicated to the Evans Gambit, one of the most aggressive and attacking chess openings for white. I will guide you through all the key ideas, strategies, tricks, and traps you need to know to play it successfully. We begin with the Italian game: pawn to a4, pawn to a5, knight to f3, knight to c6, followed by developing the bishops with bishop to c4, bishop to c5. The Evans Gambit is initiated with the move pawn to b4, sacrificing a pawn to gain active counterplay. From this point, black has three primary options: capture the pawn with the bishop, capture the pawn with the knight, decline the gambit, and reposition the bishop to another square. The most common and arguably best response for black is to accept the gambit by capturing the pawn with the bishop. We'll explore this line in detail. As white, our goal is to disrupt black's control of the center by targeting the bishop with pawn to c3, gaining valuable tempo. This move compels black to retreat the bishop as it comes under immediate attack. Returning the bishop to f8 is not practical, as it would render the piece inactive. Similarly, moving the bishop to d6 is unfavorable because it blocks black's pawn and hampers the development of their other bishop. This leaves black with three logical options for the bishop's retreat: bishop to e7, bishop to a5, and bishop to c5. Let's first examine bishop to e7. While I won't delve into every specific variation, as that would be exhaustive, I will share the major ideas and strategies to help you achieve dominant positions. The most critical principle to remember is to maintain an aggressive approach. You need to keep pressuring black and throwing threats their way. Since you are often a pawn down in this opening, passive play is not an option. Aggressive tactics and consistent attacks are necessary to open up the position and take control of the game as quickly as possible. If black retreats the bishop to e7, we respond with pawn to d4, attacking the center. If black captures the pawn, we recapture with our pawn. Despite being a pawn down, we gain strong compensation. We control the center of the board. Our pieces are active and ready to attack. We are just one move away from castling. From here, we can focus on targeting the vulnerable f7 square by coordinating the queen and knight. The bishop can be positioned to prevent black's king from castling, maintaining strong attacking chances. Returning to the position, if black plays pawn to d6 to support their central pawn, we play queen to b3, eyeing the weak f7 square. Now, if black responds with knight to a5 to attack the queen, we simply capture the knight with our bishop, delivering a check. At this point, black cannot move their king to d7, as it leads to a forced sequence. Knight to e5 check, followed by pawn takes knight and queen to e6, resulting in checkmate. Therefore, black is forced to move the king to f8, leaving it exposed and unable to castle. In this position, we have the brilliant move queen to f4. Even if black's king captures we can take the knight. At this point, the material is equal, but the black king is exposed and unable to castle, while we are ahead in development. This sets up a strong position for white and a promising game. Returning to this position, if black tries a move like knight to f6, supporting the pawn on f7, we can simply eliminate this defender by capturing the knight with our bishop. After black recaptures with the pawn, we play bishop to f7, delivering a check. If the black king moves to d7, we respond with queen to e6, which is checkmate. If the black king moves to f8, we retreat the bishop to h5, threatening checkmate on the next move. In either case, it becomes extremely difficult for black to recover from this position. Thus, we have explored the possibilities when black retreats the bishop to e7. Now let's examine the most common response you will encounter: bishop to a5. This move allows white to employ some very effective tactical ideas. After bishop to a5, we play pawn to d4, attacking the center. If black responds with pawn to d6, we simply play queen to b3, continuing with the same attacking ideas we discussed earlier. If black captures the pawn on d4, we should castle first, as the bishop is pinning our pawn to the king. If black gets greedy and captures another pawn, which many players tend to do, they will soon find themselves in serious trouble. Let's analyze the position after pawn takes on c3 and we play queen to b3. Black is forced to prevent the potential check on f7, leaving them with two primary options: queen to f6 or queen to e7. If black plays queen to f6, this move appears stronger, as it not only guards f7 but also protects the pawn on c3. However, we can respond with pawn to a5, attacking the queen. If black captures the pawn with the knight, we respond with rook to a1, pinning the knight to the king. If black tries to defend with pawn to d6, we play queen to a4, attacking the pinned bishop, which cannot escape and is lost. If black plays queen to e7, here, black gives up the ce3 pawn. We capture it with the knight by playing knight takes on c3. Black will likely respond with knight to f6, a natural developing move that simultaneously opens up 2 squares for the black king to castle. To prevent black from castling, we attack the queen by playing knight to d5. If black captures the knight with their knight, we recapture with the pawn. Taking with the pawn is better because it not only threatens black's remaining knight, but also opens the e-file for our rook to attack the king. Eventually, the knight will have to move. If black moves the knight to b4, it will be disastrous, as we can then play rook to e1, pinning the queen, which will be lost. If black instead moves the knight to e5, we respond with knight takes on e5, followed by queen takes on e5. At this point, we play bishop to b2, attacking the queen and the pawn behind it. If black moves the queen to g5 to defend the pawn, our strategy is to stop black from castling by playing queen to a3, maintaining pressure and keeping the king exposed. We will also aim to push black's queen off the g5 square by playing pawn to h4. At some point, we will launch our attack by bringing our rooks into play along the open files. As you can imagine, black's queenside pieces will remain passive spectators throughout the game, and it's only a matter of time before we finish off black. Returning to this position, I want to highlight another scenario. If black decides to capture on e4 with their queen, in this case, we can play bishop to g5. This move applies additional pressure on the f6 square. Even if black manages to castle, we can capture on f6 with our bishop, forcing the king to take. This would allow us to follow up with a devastating attack involving the knight, pinning the king and queen. Even if black plays another move instead, we have a strong secondary line of attack by activating our rooks to pin the queen and continue the assault. Once again, you have plenty of attacking options, making this a promising game for white. Now let's go back and consider another scenario. We've seen how you can dominate black if they capture on c3, but what if black plays a different move, such as bishop to b6, pawn to d6, or knight to f6? Your strategy in these cases remains straightforward. Look to recapture the pawn on c3. Bring your queen out to b3 to target the vulnerable f7 square. Prevent black from castling by playing moves like bishop to a3 or queen to a3. Advance your knights toward black's king to increase the pressure. Eventually, open up the position and use your rooks along the e-file to launch an attack. If you follow these principles, you will be able to keep black under constant pressure throughout the game and eventually secure a victory. Now, let's review. We've analyzed the responses bishop to e7 and bishop to a5 in detail. Now let's analyze the bishop to c5 move. If black plays bishop to c5, we respond with pawn to d4, challenging the center. If black captures on d4, we recapture with pawn to c3, forcing black's bishop to move. If the bishop retreats to b6, we reach a position similar to what we've discussed earlier. Regardless of where the bishop retreats, black loses time and falls behind in development. From here, we can activate our queen, castle kingside, and develop the knight to c3.